Welcome to the View Magazine's Rebel Justice podcast from our Someone's Daughter podcast series. This week, we bring you Margaret Meehan, a qualified intuitive healer and spiritual teacher who works with women who have suffered from domestic abuse. Margaret shares how she came about her healing practices and the benefits they can have for women who have lived through trauma. Margaret, thank you so much for coming and being with us, sharing a bit about your experience. So just to start with, I'd love you to tell us a little bit about yourself, mostly regarding how is it to be a modern Irish woman in an Ireland that is changing so fast and growing in diversity and in strength.
Okay. Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm so grateful and so honored to be asked. A big question, but so for me, I'm 37. I'm a mum. I'm a partner. I'm a sister. I'm all sorts. And in this world, I think at the moment, it's important that we have a voice, and especially in Ireland at the moment. So I'm doing a lot of work in the well-being and healing space, but my background is in finance, and I came from a corporate banking world. So it was a very male-driven kind of area, and it was very much dominated by men. And for me, I suppose I wanted to make a change, so I really worked my way up, and I had quite a senior role, and I loved it. But I think it's important that we don't lose our femininity as well in the process. And I think that's what I'm seeing in Ireland at the moment, is that women are stepping up, but they're not afraid to have the softness and the vulnerability and also to love themselves. It's no longer a badge of honor to work yourself to the bone anymore. And we used to live in a society where, the more stressed you are, the better a worker you are. So now, and I love that. I think it's amazing. And coming from a corporate background, seeing all these women that are leaning in, and all the women in power that are coming into these senior roles across all areas of Ireland, I just think it's really empowering for all the young women in Ireland as well to look up to.
Yes. Well, I laughed when you said about, we used to think that the more stressed and the busier we are, the more successful we are. And hopefully that's changing a little bit.
I do think it is. And I would have seen that in my previous career, where we worked the long hours and we were in early, we were there late. We were dying to be seen, but never seen, and working weekends and not taking days off. And I mean, that's just, it just is no way to live. And it actually, you don't get the best out of yourself. That's a very short-term thing that we can do. And then I would have seen so many people on sick leave, stress leave, having breakdowns, relationships falling apart, becoming physically unwell. And it was all down to stress, and I think now people are waking up to that connection.
Yes. So you come from a finance world. So how did you get into the healing and spirituality world? Well, maybe there's something that inspired you. How did that happen?
Yeah. So for me, I guess I'm lucky that I was always open to this world. So I was brought up in a home where, we had good faith. I wouldn't say we were over religious, but like we talked about angels and stories and old Irish folklore. So there was always that magic, I suppose, as a child. And then for me, there was a few times in my life where I was catapulted more into this world. So one was when I was 17, my dad passed away. And that really it was a tough time, because you don't expect your parents to pass, and you think they're invincible. And all of a sudden, my dad was there and then he wasn't. So for me, I was searching then for meaning, and I dived into it a bit more because my heart was open to it. And then I went through my 20s and, was enjoying life a little bit, but still very much open to that world. But when I was kind of coming around to the age of 30, I was very much in that corporate world. I could see people around me falling, you know, stressed, really struggling. And I started to feel stressed myself. I started to suffer physically. I used to always have an issue with my throat, and I was a salesperson. I used to represent the bank I worked for a lot in speaking and presenting. So I suddenly realized I had all these issues with my throat. I was swallowing difficulties. Anyway, long story short, I went to many doctors, should I say, and the only relief I got was when I went to a healer. And within days, and it had been going on months, within days, she identified it was a blockage with one of my energy centers. I wasn't really expressing who I was or what message I really wanted to get across. And that really catapulted me back in, and I started doing a lot of work, and I started bringing it more into my daily life, my rituals, morning routines. I started really to become aware. So I think I was living outside of my body for a long time, like we all do. And then we start to become aware and we can identify it. So that was about 7-8 years ago, and I haven't really looked back. I then also a few years ago went on a journey with fertility, and I now have a gorgeous little boy, Sean. But it took me a long time to conceive, and I had to do fertility treatment, and that really got me deeper in again. I really leaned on my healing. I did a lot of womb healing, a lot of trauma, a lot of grief. And yeah, it just really, I was very aware of that my body was storing emotions, and I needed a way to release them. That wasn't just medication, or, you know, I needed to acknowledge what was happening and actively go through the growth and the work. And yeah, and it led me down a path of, this is my career now, and I love it.
Wow. When you talked about your throat and having so many issues, I'm an actress and I'm a singer. And for many years also, that was like, I was always having trouble with my throat.
Okay.
I also feel like since I've opened up a little bit more, I don't do the work that you do, but became more open to things and tried to look after myself in that way that we're talking about in the beginning.
Yeah.
I hardly have had anything. Obviously, I'm curious about the work that you do, and maybe you'll tell us a little bit more about it, but totally see how it comes from inside and us being aware of what's happening for us too.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I say this to people all the time. Our bodies are so clever, and sometimes we can become frustrated if we're sick or we're anxious and almost, why is this happening to me? But our bodies are so clever. It's trying to get our attention. And instead of wondering why me, it's maybe sitting with that feeling and saying, okay, what are you trying to tell me? And when you talk about the throat, it's funny you mentioned singing, because when people come to see me in clinic, and I often say to them, put on a song, put on the CD player in the car and sing on your way home. Your voice needs to be heard in whatever way it can be. So just start to sing. And you know, it's sometimes the simple things that really do work, you know?
Oh, that's so interesting. So maybe you could explain a little bit more about what your work involves. So when someone comes to the clinic, I think there's themes that you used: flora, fauna, folklore, and saints. So it seems like to be a very broad sort of range.
Yeah. So I suppose I've trained in so many different types of the healing that we could be here all day, but I essentially just say, come to my clinic and we'll do an intuitive healing. So I'm very much led by energy. So like science tells us that everything is energy, and that's what we're working with and we're tapping into. So often, primarily I deal with women. It just seems to be the area that I focus on. And often the women that come to see me, and this, you'll find this with many people that do the work, there's certain I suppose areas that come up a lot. And for me, it's usually domestic abuse, sexual violence, sexual trauma, fertility issues. And for me, that, and people that work with energy, that's the lower energy centers in the body. So we have what's called chakras, which are our energy centers, and there's 3 in particular that I work with a lot. So our solar plexus, which is our sense of self, our sacral, which is our womb space and our creativity, and our root, which is our safety and our grounding. So in a lot of the women I see, these are off balance for many reasons. So when someone comes to see me, we have a chat. You know, I'm very intuitive. I pick up a lot. I feel the energy. We initially have a chat, and then we go through the usual things, you know, just to make sure everyone's okay. Because depending on someone's history, you know, there could be triggers and things. So we'll just get to know each other and identify that. And then I treat them. So I bring them into a lovely meditative state. They're lying down, they're all tucked up, cozy and nice. And I go through their body from the very top of the crown of their head right down to their feet and balance all of the energy in the body. And if I feel like anything is coming up or needs to be drawn out, then I work with that. And I do that through a few different things, but primarily Reiki. So I'm a Reiki master and teacher, and I channel the universal energy to clear people's energy centers and to bring them back into balance and harmony. So if you can imagine, I'm a visual person. So like on our phones, and we've all these tabs open, we've 100 tabs open at one time. So essentially what we're doing is we're closing down more tabs, closing them all down so that everything is back to zero. Your glass is not overflowing all the time, and that you're able to go back out and take on whatever you need to do in the world. Everyone that's a Reiki master is slightly different. For me, I get guided a lot by my angels, my saints, my ancestors, my guides. So lots of messages can come in for people, and I share that. I always share that with them, and it could be something they need that's going to support them. So I'm very much like natural. So it could be an oil that's supportive. So for example, rose oil. Rose oil is the oil of love. It's the highest vibration. So usually it's a very motherly energy. If someone's grieving or sad, you know, rose oil is amazing to rub on the skin topically, to aromatically, so diffuse it. So it could be a little message like that, and we have other things then as well. But that's just, I suppose, a very a very short and sweet answer to it.
That sounds wonderful. So like you said, you do work with women that suffer from, you know, a domestic abuse. And many of the people listening to the podcast, they are either working in the front line of domestic abuse in prisons, or they have other traumatic environments. So, I mean, you have said how it would go if they came to see you, but do you have any tips for them to, like, maybe on their day-to-day to protect themselves from this trauma, and for their self-care?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything, as I said, is energy. And the one thing I always say to people is just to have an awareness. So if you're aware that you know, you're walking into a room and you feel, oh my God, there's such an atmosphere in here, that's energy. You walk in and someone's had an argument, and you can cut the tension with a knife. So that's how I explain energy to people. So for people that are you know, working in those industries or living in them, one thing I'd always say is to drop back into yourself. And there's a few ways you can do that, but a very simple way is placing one hand on your heart space and one hand on your womb space, and just allowing yourself to feel into that for a moment, and then taking 3 deep breaths. So breathing in through your nose and filling up your tummy. It's so, like, as women, we're always trying to hold in our tummies, but no, we want to fill it out, fill it up, and then letting a big sigh out through our mouth. And when we do that 3 times, we're doing a few things. So we're connecting back into our own heart space physically by touching ourselves. We're breathing life back into our whole body. So we're oxygenating everything, and then we're letting it all out again. So that really helps to center you, to ground you if you're feeling anxious. And in a lot of those situations, you could be a person that picks up on energy. So you might be actually feeling other people's emotions and not yourself. So that's a really good one to do on the spot. Another one is being out in nature. So barefoot, just standing in the grass and doing the same thing, taking a couple of deep breaths in and out, bringing yourself back within. That's the key thing. If you're somebody that works in it, I'm a real believer in protecting yourself going into those situations and protecting yourself when you come out. So some people might take a moment in their car before they go in and just visualize themselves like in a bubble. You know, whatever sort of religion, faith, beliefs you resonate with, just maybe calling someone in and asking them to wrap you in a little bubble of protection. And then when you're coming out after the day or after work or a visit, and in the car, just saying, you know, coming back in and asking them to clear any energy. And the simplest way to do that is just imagining a wave washing over you. And you're just clearing off anything that you don't need anymore. So it's very simple things like that. But the key is awareness, because sometimes I've been in situations before I really understood, and I go, why do I feel this way? Or I felt great coming here, but I'm coming in now and all of a sudden I'm anxious. Or but what was happening was I was picking up on other people's emotions, and I didn't know how to protect myself. And it would be another podcast episode altogether. But like I use crystals and sprays and different things to do that. But anything earthy is very grounding. So if you even think about like soups with carrots and potatoes and like the Irish in me, turnip, even drinking things like that would be very grounding and bring you back down into your body.
Wow, and that is so interesting. I eat soup a lot. I'm Portuguese, and
right, okay.
At least in my family, we just eat soup at every meal.
Yeah.
But now, after listening to you, it is this being conscious of, okay, I am eating something from the earth.
Yeah,
This is going to ground me. This can help me ground. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, and I think it's because we're on our phones all the time, right? Or we're multitasking and we're doing 10 things at once, but it's actually just being present. If all you have is 5 minutes to eat your soup, and you know, being present with it, or when we go for a walk, not always having the earpods in and just maybe taking in the sounds around us. It's about being present, really, and not distracting our mind too much. Obviously, they all serve a purpose, but you know, having those pockets of time that are just for you to help you connect back in with yourself.
Yeah. And I think everything you said, I think it's very practical. I think anyone who's listening, it's something they can, you know, hopefully do easily and see the benefits, which takes me to my next question. I mean, the benefits for someone who has suffered or is supporting someone who suffers from abuse, for example, are endless. But in your view, Reiki, how does it help to recover and heal? Maybe you have an example, maybe you have a story.
Yeah, so I mean, it has huge benefits, and the healing is one part of the work. So I would have worked with somebody last year, and so first of all, when they're in with me initially, I tend to recommend at least 4 sessions, you know, because it takes time and to open up. But when they first came to me, you know, they were sharing a lot about what had happened and what was happening. So there's a few things happening. There's trauma in the body already from past scenarios. There's fear. There's all sorts of emotions. So what we're trying to do is, a person's cup is completely overflowing. So what we're trying to do is, energy wise, is to take some of that from the body. So what no longer is needed. So that's something on an energetic level. And I would have done that with this individual. But another key part to my work is I really look at the self and self-love, forgiveness of yourself. We tend to hold, especially women, I think, we blame ourselves for everything that happens. Even when we're being abused or in difficult situations. So I would focus a lot, and we talk about forgiveness, and I would give them tools. So I've also been trained as a holistic life coach. But I do it in tandem with the Reiki. So we look at ways to work on themselves, and a lot of it is forgiving themselves, because maybe they've stayed in situations because of children or financial reasons. And I do a lot of mirror work. So I give homework almost, where I'm asking them to stand in the mirror and tell them good things about themselves, like that they're, you know, we find it hard in Ireland, certainly, to take a compliment. It's like, oh, this whole thing, but I'm like, take the compliments. And it can be difficult and it can be triggering, but we do a 21-day practice where every day we do something different in the mirror. So you're looking in the mirror and you're telling yourself things. And I ask these individuals to, have a notebook and track it. And this particular person had lots of physical conditions presenting in the body. And by the time we had finished the 4 sessions, which took about 3 months, like a lot of the physical conditions were gone. The confidence levels were up. The belief in themselves, I don't deserve this, whereas initially coming in, it was, I know I do this wrong or that. The language changed. And that's really what I work on with people, is knowing that we don't deserve the things that happen to us sometimes. And it's okay to say, I've had enough. And it's also okay to forgive our past selves for maybe accepting that. Because we can only be where we are now. We can't spend our lives regretting what we did 10 years ago, or what's going to happen in the future. So it's all about, working on yourself now to bring you just contentment and inner peace. So with this person, it was like such a transformation from day one to the end of the 3 months. And they were then going on to do other therapies. So they were doing another form of counselling that was going to look at some of the things that had happened, where they were very closed off to that because they didn't want to, I suppose, revisit it. But by the end of the 3 months with me, they understood that to heal from it, they needed to go back and dig into it, and just more open and honest, even with their medical team, because often when I'm working with people, they're also under the care of their general practitioners, or maybe psychiatric nurse or doctor, and more open and honest about actually how they're feeling, because certainly a lot of us go in and we say, oh no, we're okay this week, and we don't really tell the truth. So yeah, I see huge transformations, and I always find such I find such joy and such peace in being able to do that for people.
Wow, it sounds really inspiring. So could you tell us a bit more about your upcoming workshops and what they're about and what people can expect from them? Do you have anything coming up?
Yes, I always do. So in general, I do a monthly meditation group, and I teach Reiki, and I teach about crystals, and we do vision boards. Okay, so I tend to always have some of them coming up, and they're all about feeding your soul, really, like what I spoke about, what we do in the one-to-one sessions, but self-love, being kind to ourselves, forgiveness. And I usually have a theme, and then when I'm teaching Reiki, but I also do retreats. So I have a couple of retreats coming up. I'm doing 2 retreats in collaboration with 2 of my friends, Angela and Roisin. They're both in the industry, and they're called the Sakura retreat. So the cherry blossom tree. So it's all about awakening after a dark winter, which is what cherry blossom represents. So very apt, I think, considering we're coming back out in the world. And that's really a day of connection, and we share some cacao, and we talk about grounding ourselves and healing ourselves, and I take them through meditation and energy cleansing. So it's just a lovely day. We have lunch together, and everyone kind of learns a bit more about awareness and energy healing. And then myself, I run retreats, residential retreats. So I have one coming up in a few months where it's a 3-day retreat. And I take small numbers. So I only usually take about 12 people, and I book a place exclusively, and it's just 3 days of like nourishing our bodies with good food. We do yoga, and we do some creative activities. So we make some crystal jewelry, we do some art, we do healing. There's a silent meditation walk down by a gorgeous river and gardens, and it's just really an immersive experience, and it's all just about you and your healing. And we spoil them. We have gifts and everything. So it's just really, I mean, sometimes I want to go myself as someone taking part. So I have that coming up, and I have I always share details on my website and my social media and all the usual handles.
So that's where I was going to ask, how do we get in touch with you, or how do we find out the details?
Yeah. So my name is Margaret O Brien, but my business is under Moonqueen Healing. And so I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook under Moonqueen Healing. My website is moonqueenhealing.ie, and all of my contact details are on there.
And do you do any online sort of support if anyone needs?
Yes, so I do a lot of distance healing sessions. So I have a lot of clients in America, Australia, different parts of Ireland and across Europe. So energy doesn't know time or space. So it's actually sometimes my most powerful sessions are online. And it's treated the same as if you were in with me. I do the very same process. It's just that you're physically in your own space. And that would be probably 50% of the work I do is online, with women again, mostly. And I do work with children as well. Sometimes I work with parents and children together, but quite a lot of online, particularly coming out of the world we were in for the last few years. I moved some of my courses online as well. I do love the in-person aspect, but I'm aware not everyone is in the heart of Ireland where I am. So it's nice to be able to connect anywhere in the world, really.
I'm sure it's great for everyone to hear that. So we just have a final question. I don't know if you ever think about this, but what would you like your legacy to be? What would that look like?
Oh, wow. I suppose since I've had my son, I've really, this has been something on my mind, about how you want to break patterns and things like that. So for me, I'm a big believer in love. I'm always leaning into love, even when life throws me curveballs and things come up that aren't expected. I lean into love, and I trust that there's a plan, and I'd like that to be my legacy. I'd like my son to carry that in his heart with them. I'd like whoever he falls in love with to feel that as well. If he's blessed with his own children, that's what I want to leave. That, love is always the answer, even when it's hard, even when it's messy, that if we can just drop into our own hearts, that we'll always find the way.
Thank you so much, Margaret. It's been such a pleasure chatting to you. And I'm sure that everyone who listened to the podcast will feel your energy and to see the benefit of your work. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. And it's been such a joy to chat with you today.
And this concludes our podcast for today. You can learn more about Margaret's upcoming workshops and contact on moonqueenhealing.ie. The View is the only organization in the third sector that puts women with lived experience at the heart of all we do. From our board to our volunteers, The View is a living community that is creating a brighter future through art, storytelling, and hope. Come and be part of our brave mission and vision for a fairer world. Thank you for listening.